IT considerations that are specific to the COVID work from home trend. So over the past year, COVID has forced many of us to work from home. Even as the virus subsides, remote work will continue for some of us at least part of the time. So though remote work offers the potential for cost savings, it also exposes us to new IT risks. So over the next 20 minutes, we're going to look at work from home trends, review practices to limit IT risks, and discuss cost savings that have been achieved by one Connecticut company as it adopted to a remote work model. Submit your questions as they come up and stick around at the end for a free offer. So I guess if you want to post questions, you can probably use the chat to do that. Okay. So we asked a question of everybody in the chamber. Nancy was nice enough to send out a polling question. We got a modest number of responses, but it was a simple question. We said, to what extent is your company working remotely at this point? This question was asked in the last few weeks. We got about 15 respondents. And as you can see in the bottom of the table there, over 80%, 87% said they'll either be working always remotely or sometimes remotely, or they're currently doing that. They're either 87% are either always or sometimes working remotely at this point. Now that may moderate to some degree, obviously, as people get more comfortable and as we move back to the offices. But on a national level, Gallup has done a poll. The most recent numbers came in September, and this is over thousands of people, and they found over 58% were either always remote or sometimes remote. Now, again, this was almost at the height of the pandemic, so we expect some moderation, but most of the surveys I've looked at suggest that it's going to be probably 25 to 35% of all employees will work remotely going forward. At least that's some part of the week. And a typical thing would be to work couple days at the office and 2 or 3 days at home, depending on how they want to work it out. Now, in Connecticut, we believe that Connecticut is going to be a little higher than the national average. And the reason is we have more white collar workers here, people in finance, insurance consulting, these types of professions lend themselves to remote work. So our state will probably have a higher than average remote work component. Remote work is not going to go away. That's the main takeaway here. So there are a number of IT issues that are need to be discussed. Whether you rely on an IT consultant or have an in-house team, the work from home trend has made IT support much harder. When everyone worked at the office, IT only had to worry about one router and one firewall. Now there are many more endpoints to secure, and the work must be done remotely over a much greater variety of equipment. So the challenges are much greater as we work from home. On this chart, you can see a number of the technical issues. I'm not going to run through each one of these. Each one of them could be an extended conversation, but let me just make a few general comments. And anybody, Anthony's certainly an expert in a lot of this areas, and I'm sure Greg and Tom could speak to it too. Maybe all of us could. Certainly, Melissa probably knows quite a bit about this stuff. So typical work from home is you've got your home router. Are you setting up a separate router for your office work? Most likely you're not. Most likely you're using what you had before. Well, unless you're different from a lot of people, you probably haven't paid a lot of attention to the security of that router. You might have set it up 4 or 5 years ago. You might not even have changed the password that it came with coming out of the box. So that could be a very vulnerable point for you right there. Password protection is a very common cause of breaches. Are your passwords secure? Are you changing them regularly? Are they long enough in length? Are they unique? You know the drill about passwords. A lot of people don't keep their software up to date, and as we work from home with a more inconsistent with a lack of uniform set of equipment, this problem is amplified. Are you using two-factor authentication? Highly recommended when you work anywhere, but certainly when you're working remotely. And obviously you have to have your antivirus software in place. Big issue is people are using virtual private networks, but there's a trend now towards thinking about the next generation, which would be a zero trust type of a methodology. VPNs are probably the most common way of securing remote connection, but they are not without their risks as well. So there's zero trust movement is gaining some momentum, but it has its own challenges. It's not. It can be a lot more complicated. Working from home, you should be having, your office should be doing something to monitor endpoints. There's a lot of endpoints to monitor, but there's some trade-offs there with the bandwidth that requires to do that. So all these things are unique challenges that the work from home trend has brought upon us now. The bottom line of it is there's greater security exposure now than there was when people were working in their office. And the other thing is, as we all work from home, there's a tendency to mix our personal and our business worlds. That is another potential for exposure. Are we backing up our data? We have to try and do that, of course, because when you get hacked, you need to recover from it. And if you don't have a proper backup, you're quite exposed. Okay, let's move on. So what are the cost implications? Well, I think a lot of CFOs are quite pleased. They think, hey, if we can have people work from home, maybe we can even cancel our lease, save a whole lot of money. The bottom line looks better. There are significant savings that result from working from home, and companies should be able to pocket some of these savings, but they should also consider using some of that money to mitigate the additional risks of remote work. So obviously their company would save on office lease expenses. In a second, we're going to talk about a real life example where there was very significant savings. Employees save money too. You don't have to get in the car and commute to the office every day, or maybe at all. You spend less on meals and laundry expenses and clothing expenses. But on the other hand, the vulnerabilities have gone up. Some companies might be wise to consider actually purchasing new routers and other equipment to outfit each company's home office. I don't think that's a common practice, but it'd probably be something that would be very well worth considering just to mitigate the risk. The IT department is under stress. There's a lot more work to do. There are tools that they can purchase for remote monitoring. If they don't have them, they probably should. So there's some expense that will go out the door. But the bottom line is that there will be savings. The company will save money to the degree that they work remotely, and the individuals will save money from the process. How they use some of those savings are going to dictate how they handle the additional risks going forward. So let's talk about a case that a use case of one of the current CAPS customers. They actually came to us over a year before the pandemic. They are a consulting company based down in the Stanford area. And they had had a situation where they looked at the work patterns of their employees and said, you know, most of our guys and women are on the road more than half the time. They're visiting clients, they're overseas, they're not in the office. They're spending a fair amount of money on their office suite in Stanford, and they made the decision to close that office. They came to CAPS because they had a fair amount of their applications were in the cloud, but they had some residual database applications and some of their billing applications that they had hosted on their own servers, and those servers needed a place to be a new home once they literally got out of their office. So that's why they came to us. They also asked us if we could provide some conference space when they needed it, since people were going to be working from their home offices full time. And we were able to offer them a flexible arrangement where they can come and use some of our office space as needed going forward. So in Connecticut, the costs can be very significant. For example, it costs between $5,000 and $10,000 per year per employee to lease type A office space. And even a small company, those are real dollars. So CFOs are rubbing their hands together and saying, "Wow, we can be heroes here and save a lot of money for the company if we just move out of our office completely." And there are some stories right now. In fact, a major financial services company down in Stamford just announced in the last 2 months that they are going completely virtual, completely remote, and they expect to save over $1 million a year in the first year just on their office lease space. So big money to be saved, but again, there are some changes that need to be factored in to properly address the risks of working remotely. So now, as I mentioned, the co-location situation for us, that's one of the services we provide for those companies that decide to completely go remote. And if they have residual servers and residual IT systems that need a home, that would be a good use for a place like CAPS. That's one of the services we provide. Even companies that are not completely vacating their office, but are working on a part-time basis. For social distancing, they may make a decision to move move their IT systems out of their offices. Typical small office might have a closet or a small room where they've got their server cabinets. That room could be very helpful if they move that equipment to a data center, remote data center such as CAPS, and then can use that space for the employees to spread out when they're there. Okay, so now we've run through it. Would we have any questions from our audience about the general subject? Don't think we had anything come in. So here's the free offer. If any of you are interested, we'd be very willing to set up a time, obviously do it remotely and safely, to do an evaluation of your current situation with respect to remote work or any general issues you have with IT infrastructure, and make some recommendations about ways we might be able to save you some money and improve the service delivery. I want to thank you all for giving us the time, and that will wrap up our official presentation. And back to you, Nancy.